This is an interactive session, and you will be presented with questions for discussion in small groups. At this time, please complete the following steps. Assemble into groups of 3 to 8 people. Select one person in your group to help prompt and lead discussion. You may have handouts at your table. Please refer to these throughout the session. We will begin in 1 minute.
You know, it's okay for people to know they're going to die. It's okay for people to be able to say goodbye to their families and their friends and to tell them whatever it is they need to tell them. It's okay for them to grieve. It's okay for them to be sad and be angry and even to be hopeless for a little while. It's okay, and it's unfair, in my opinion, it's unfair to deny them the opportunity to feel all those things and to do those things.
Recently, a family that wishes to remain anonymous faced an unnecessarily difficult and painful experience trying to obtain quality end-of-life care for a loved one. Despite many talented physicians caring for the patient, the last few weeks of this person's life were painful, lonely, and frightening because attending physicians evaded the frank and emotional conversations with the patient and family that are so helpful at end of life. The experience was so traumatizing that the family donated several $100,000 to Hospice of Northwest Ohio in order to fund this and other programs to educate physicians about this critical time in patient care, so no one would have to experience what they went through. Thank you for joining us in this experience. Having these difficult conversations could arguably be one of the hardest things we have to do as physicians. In the next 60 minutes, we'll hear the perspectives of practicing physicians and family members to help provide new light on how these conversations could be viewed. Concluding the program, you'll be invited to attend an optional online CME-credited course that will provide you with techniques to better equip you to have these conversations with your patients. Let's get started.
Most of the people that go into our profession goes in with generally the same motivation to help make a difference and make an improvement in somebody's life.
What really appealed to me about medicine is the ability to help people.
I've always felt the need to, if possible, help people.
I wanted to do medicine. I wanted to become a physician because I wanted to make a difference in people's lives.
Oh, it has always been part of my dreams, is just to be a practicing physician and helping patients.
I wanted to become a physician because I wanted to have a tangible effect on other people's lives.
Yeah, I wanted to do something where I felt like I had an impact on people's lives.
Because it's really a process of getting to know a person and getting to know what's going on with them. It's very much centered on the quality of the human interaction.
And so being a physician is a wonderful way to help people because it's part of what you do every day.
You know, medicine is an art. It is not a science. It's supported by science, but it truly is an art.
One of the most important things is to really connect with the person you're talking to, sort of on a personal, a human level, really talk about what that person is facing.
So I think more and more physicians recognize that their role is more than just cure, but to guide people through their disease process even when the outlooks can be pretty grim.
If I know what the patient wants, then it helps me understand how to best serve them.
We're dealing with human problems rather than an individual scientific problem. There's a life behind it.
Everybody loved my grandfather, and they all called him Daddy Joe.
My husband was a benefits consultant. He was a very popular person, very gregarious, outgoing personality.
I adored my mother-in-law. She was a great friend to me for many years, and in fact, never even wanted to be introduced as my mother-in-law. That insulted her. She wanted to be introduced as my friend.
My dad was a pretty take charge kind of guy, and he managed everything that he could, and we just didn't really have to worry about him. He was very active.
My husband was very much wanting to be in control of his own life. He said, I don't want to be the guinea pig anymore for research and development of new drugs that aren't working.
One of the promises I made Mom was that she wouldn't die in a hospital, that she would die at home.
My brother was a very amazing person. He was born with cerebral palsy, got his PhD in psychology. Because of his disabilities, he developed a real interest in working with people with disabilities in the mental health field, and so he wrote the American Psychological Association guidelines on treating people with disabilities, and it was published posthumously. Yeah, he was really amazing.
It is never, ever easy to lose a patient.
There's been times over the years that, I've left a room sometimes crying.
I won't say that it doesn't feel bad when one of our patients dies. It does. And that's okay too. It's okay to feel sad.
It just tears your heart apart because you're reacting as a human being, as a parent. It's hard.
And I can say in 20 years of doing clinical care, it's never easy because every situation is unique. You start to really get yourself in their shoes. How would I feel and what would I want out of the person taking care of me?
Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've just heard. Discuss the following questions in groups. Please finish conversations and direct your attention towards the front of the room.
Well, end-of-life conversations are generally not easy conversations.
They're really difficult. They're painful. They bring up emotions for me, and they certainly bring up emotions for the families.
Because it's difficult and it's awkward and it's emotional for them.
It's always challenging. Most of my patients I've never met before, especially when you have so many specialists and somebody's got all these problems wrong. I think that makes it harder.
I think a lot of oncologists stay away from it because they're afraid of it or because they think it's going to draw out the conversation for an hour.
I think there's no question about the fact that most doctors are pretty time pressured.
The time issue is a big one. In medicine, everybody is so rushed.
But busyness is not a good excuse. If we're going to be late because we're doing the right thing, we're going to be late.
Well, that's the critical time I think they need us the most.
You have to be open. You have to be able to give people guidance.
It's a matter of being forthright and honest and looking at bringing them back to the big picture and then taking the time to really walk them through it.
He had kind of an unusual disease that we didn't really know. For the time we were growing up, I knew he had something, but we didn't really have a name for it. He had been restless and uncomfortable, and he didn't quite understand. He was confused about some things, and he didn't quite understand all the things that were happening. But very shortly on that Sunday, in that afternoon, he changed, and he wasn't aware of us. He knew we were there, but he really wasn't able to respond to us anymore. He changed that much in a few hours. On the Sunday morning, the doctor came into the room and I asked him, do you think he can get past this? Because my dad had been kind of changing. And he said, oh, absolutely. And I was really kind of puzzled by that. And so he left the room, and about 30 seconds later I went out of the room to try to catch him because I couldn't believe what he was saying. And he was already gone. I couldn't find him. But the nurse was coming around the corner and I said, I'm looking for him. She said, no, he's gone. She said, there isn't anything more they can do, and he told me to come tell you. And I said, I'm sorry, but that's not your job. That's not what you should be doing. He should have done that. I asked him straight, and he didn't give me anything.
He was exhibiting some symptoms in the fall, having some vision issues, then having some problem-solving issues. And right before we saw a doctor, he actually was unable to dress himself properly. So I was suspicious it was either a stroke or I was praying it wasn't early Alzheimer's or a brain tumor, but we saw a neurologist and he had an MRI, and the MRI showed a very large brain tumor. And the physician communicated it to me via phone because he was in another building. But when he told me, he said, well, it's not a stroke, it's the other possibility. He couldn't even say what it was. And pretty much my whole world ended right there.
My mom had multiple myeloma, cancer, which we understood to be treatable but not curable, so we knew it was terminal. And so consequently, I became immersed as a champion. And I did a lot of research and selected a hematologist-oncologist. And anyway, I came home one time and my wife said, well, she says, we just had the rug pulled out from under us. Dr. X just said there was nothing more he could do. I thought about that, and I said, that's it? I said, that was the extent of the conversation? There was nothing. And so I said, not acceptable. How could you have a relationship with a physician, a treating physician, for over a year and basically get left with no options? It was just so sudden, and it was so abrupt.
These doctors really were phenomenal, but they weren't very good at acknowledging that things weren't working with him. It did become very clear at a point that he wasn't going to beat it, and he was dying. That was very clear to me, and I had asked to please talk to the doctor and to please ask the doctor to give my brother the opportunity to understand what was really going on. And this guy explained to him, when people are on this chemo, if it's going to work, we know very quickly that it's going to work. This chemo isn't working for you. And he was very honest. He was really gentle. It was great. And he said, I think probably what we need to do is have you go home and be as comfortable as you can and be with your family and enjoy your last few days, however long it is. And my brother looked at me and he said, and he was okay, and he said, I'm gonna die. And it was okay. He was okay at that point. And then comes in this world-famous oncologist, and he comes sweeping in with this completely different perspective of, well, we don't know, maybe another round of chemo would help. It's not hurting you. You're not having any side effects, so we could try it. And we can see in 2 weeks, we'll see how it's doing. I mean, I was like stunned. And so my brother was like, yeah, okay, give it to me. And without any further communication, my brother died 9 days later. And there wasn't even 2 weeks. It was, to my mind, just really horrible.
The medical school training and everything is to cure, not recognizing that there are certain life processes that are just beyond what a physician can do.
We tend to associate death with violence. Natural death is not a violent phenomenon.
The more that we think about this process of death and dying, the more comfortable we'll become with it, and the better we'll be as caregivers at shepherding people through this experience. Death is tough. It is tough. It's never easy.
It can feel like failure. I mean, you came to me so that hopefully I could help you get better. It appears that that's not going to happen.
We're trained to beat disease. We want to win, and we don't want to lose.
We feel like we've done something wrong. We don't know enough. We can't do something right. I mean, nobody wants to feel like a failure.
You know, I don't know about a failure, but you can't help but be disappointed.
I'd like to think that we're beyond this idea that death is always a failure.
Now, I would argue that it's not a failure as long as you've taken good care of the person. That, I mean, everybody does reach the point of the end of life.
I mean, on an intellectual basis, I mean, all physicians understand that death is inevitable for all of us. It's okay. We're not perfect. We don't have supernatural powers. All we can do is treat one patient at a time.
If you can't offer testing or, you know, other further treatments or something to make them better, then they feel like a failure. And I don't think they should feel like a failure. I mean, every person on the earth is finite. There isn't anybody that's lived forever so far. And they're not going to be the one to cure that. Sorry. Death is a part of living, and they need to address it just like everything else.
Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've just heard. Discuss the following questions in groups. Please finish conversations and direct your attention towards the front of the room.
Most folks and many physicians feel that more treatment is always better than less treatment. Treatment equals hope.
For patients, hope meaning that it's something to fight for, and hope for it really gives your existence a meaning. Hope does not mean treatment, and hope meaning that what are your goals in life? What are your desires? Where exactly are you standing? And you know, by understanding that, you really can give patients the best care that they want.
And I think maybe that's what physicians sometimes miss. Are they having the right conversation about the right things? You know, do they stop to think, let's all get on the same page here. What are your goals?
Hope for me is quality. And that I have something to look forward to. Our family did have the opportunity to have the last 4 months with our husband and dad without treatment at home. And that was a gift.
So our goals were to find a physician that would extend life. And he had a particular philosophy that we liked, that you take care of the whole patient. And I noticed Mom had hope. This is from someone who was going to die at the end of the year. Really gave her a whole sense of life again.
I think looking at patients as a whole in their spiritual, their social, their emotional, their medical, their physical well-being, we're all integrated. We're not little chemistry sets. We're much more complicated than that.
Sometimes you have to step back a little bit and really look at the big picture. And again, I mean, focus on what's most important to patients.
We have to stop and think, are we just shrinking something on a CAT scan or on a paper, or are we really making their life better?
We know that there are certain limits on the treatments that we give people. For the most part, when a family member says we want everything done, they're saying we want everything done that's reasonable.
If I gave you a vitamin pill and said that this was going to slow down the progression of your cancer, it would be an easy decision, right? So who wouldn't take a vitamin pill? But it's not a vitamin pill. These are the side effects of the treatment, and you have to balance that with, is it worth it to you?
She had COPD, and it's a very unpredictable illness. She said, I don't want to go through that. I'm scared to death of that. He had a very calm and informational conversation with her. And after she heard that from him, she said to me, you know, I'm not afraid of how I might die. I know it's all going to be fine. I need help and support now. I just want to live my life the best I can.
It's not really as hard as you think if you're trying to understand that you're helping patients. I'm not trying to cure everybody, because I can't cure everybody.
It's a matter of establishing goals and priorities. Yes, you want to live, but your priority is you want to be comfortable. The more important question is, what do you want me to do to keep you alive? Do you want a feeding tube so that way you live? Not that you want it, but if that's what it took to keep you alive, would you be willing to accept it?
That's part of what that end-of-life discussion is, really, is kind of a negotiation, if you will, of what are the goals here that we're trying to do in in what we think is the end of life.
Well, I don't think it would have been quite so much of a surprise for my siblings and my stepmom, and I think that would have given them the chance to really stop and think, okay, so we do have a limited time. What can we do to make the best of that? You need a period of time to kind of grieve a little bit and to try to figure out what you want. But my dad was aware for most of that time up until the last couple of days, and they kind of missed out on that, and he went through some things in the hospital that he probably shouldn't have had to go through with extra testing that wasn't offering anything for him.
The patient can become more the battlefield than a combatant in the battle. And battlefields don't fare too well.
I think that false hope for recovery is hard on people. What we say and how we say it as physicians leave just as big as scars and wounds as when we put in a central line wrong or do a bad suture job.
To take the time to fully understand where the patient is coming from and to fully explain options and information would have made all the difference in the world.
I think the mistake some people make is saying, so do you want to do nothing? If someone has a choice of doing something or nothing, they're always going to pick something. But instead of that, I say, why don't we take a different approach? Why don't we do everything else we can do to keep you comfortable, keep you out of pain?
I think that's probably a struggle that most of the doctors have. They'd like to give you the good news. They don't want to have to give you bad news, but sometimes they do.
What I hate to see is when a patient is saving their energy for the next treatment and foregoing important life events, important family events, for fear that they won't have the energy to get the next round of chemotherapy.
The time could have been different if we hadn't had to go to the hospital at all. If somebody had had the guts to say to him, don't come to the hospital. This chemo isn't working. We can tell from the reports that we're getting from the nurses who are seeing you, it's not working. That time could have been spent at home, in his surroundings, with the people he loved. His mom could have had 6 more hours with him at home. 6 more hours is not that much, but when you're talking 9 days, it's a lot.
It's obviously a difficult time for patients and families, but strange as it seems, buried in that are some really good opportunities and even some gifts sometimes.
I've seen people who have sought forgiveness from family members that they've been estranged. I've had family members that were grateful that they understood that the end was near and they were able to make peace with their other family members. And I mean, that is really, when you see something like that, I mean, it's truly profound.
People need to make choices. People need time to settle their affairs, resolve relationships, choose what it is that they want to do. Be able to have each moment count in a way that, unfortunately, we don't tend to do on a regular basis without that specter in front of us.
And sometimes when you know that your time is short, it removes a lot of the clutter. And when the clutter is removed, you can focus on what's really important.
These types of discussions are part of the professional spectrum of care that we provide. We have to get away from our own discomfort and try to become part of that family's journey through death. I found that in my training as a physician and in my interactions with family members that this was one of the more satisfying things I did. So if I bring passion to it, it's because I found that it's such a wonderful way to give. And it is a way of giving that also has great rewards. I shepherded this family and this patient through one of the most important aspects of their life. They'll remember it forever.
I couldn't ask for more than having a doctor like that. And I hope and pray that my doctor would be there for me, would be there for my children or my mother in a time like that.
The surgeon that did the original exploratory surgery was so compassionate and took so much time to explain this before and after the surgery. And I would certainly always recommend him, not only for his experience and expertise, but because of his love of the patient.
The pulmonologist was the one who stepped up and had the conversation with her. And I will always be thankful for him. And you know what? I never met the man. But I know his name and I love him to this day.
And that was the most wonderful time of my life, is taking care of my grandfather until his last breath. And just knowing that he had the type of doctor that he had made it okay. It made it a better, it made a horrible situation tolerable because he was there for us. And I can never, even to this day, thank him enough for that.
Let's take a moment to reflect on what we've just heard. Discuss the following questions in groups. Thank you for joining us in this experience. On your handout, you'll find information about the optional online CME-credited course that will provide you with in-depth techniques to better prepare you to have these conversations with your patients.